Okay, it's automatic with AutoCrat. So if you're not familiar with AutoCrat, it is an add-on for Google Sheets. So we are going to go through different steps of getting this set up. So there are some help documents through AutoCrat that I'm going to show you that's going to be helpful for everyone. We have a variety of users here in this group. So not just classroom teachers, we have, office personnel and so forth. So AutoCrat is not just for the classroom. This can help anyone that's working with data that's collected in a Google Sheet. So let's get started looking at some little tips that I have for you. So when we're looking at this, there are some steps that need to be done before you actually get into AutoCrat. So we're going to go through each of these steps and then we'll get started going through the process of AutoCrat itself. So there are three key things that you want to have set and in place before you start the AutoCrat steps or the AutoCrat process. Okay. And I do have a shortened URL down here. If you want to jot that down, I can also put that in the chat real quick. That goes to the help document, but I'm also going to show you how to get to that help document from AutoCrat itself. So we're going to go through these, creating a folder. If you're going to be collecting your data from a form, you're going to create that form first. Then next, you are going to create a form letter and or a form slide. So you can use slides now with AutoCrat as well. And within that, you are going to use what are called tags, and we'll go through all of this. There's also a tag that allows you to put in today's date. So if you are creating a form letter, it will populate today's date automatically for you. Then once these things are done, then you can go into your Google Sheets that has the data and you can open up the extension for AutoCrat and start going through the 9 steps of AutoCrat. Okay. So again, these are steps that are done before actually going into Sheets, before actually starting your AutoCrat. So I'm going to go into my Google Drive first. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to create a folder. So we're going to create this folder somewhere within our drive. Okay. So you can see here's my drive. I have a folder created inside of another folder. You can create this wherever you're going to find this. So if it's just in your drive, that's fine. So I am going to create a new folder. I'm calling it automatic with AutoCrat. So you'll see it populate here. So there is my folder. Okay. So that part is done. So going now to step number 2, create your form. Okay. So if you are collecting data from a form, you want to have your form created now. Okay. If you're typing in information into a spreadsheet directly, you don't need the form. Okay, so if you have something, maybe you have a list of parents' names and email addresses and home addresses, you already have this. Maybe you've converted it from an Excel spreadsheet. You don't have to create that Google form. You can you just use the sheet. So if you are creating a Google form, I would suggest creating that form within the folder that you just created. So everything is housed together. So if it is, your Google form and your responses, and then we have to create that form letter. I want all that information created within the folder that I just created. So I'm going to open it and everything's delayed a little bit. And then I would come in here and I would create my new Google form. So you guys can do that. I already have some stuff pre-made. So I'm going to just move all that information into my folder real quick. But you can create a blank Google form. If you are not super familiar with forms, I would at least get maybe 1 or 2 questions added into your Google form so we can add those into our form letter. So I'm going to go back up one step, and I already have a form created that I am collecting parent information on open house. So open house is a great way to get information from your parents. You can have a Chromebook sitting in the back of your classroom ready to collect this information from your parents as they're walking through your classroom. So you can see it's not super a long form. First name, last name, your student's name, what is the best way to contact you, primary contact information, secondary contact information. And then I did this more towards elementary level, but would you be able to volunteer for any of these holiday parties? So they have a checkbox. So again, very simple. If you are following along, I would get at least 1 or 2, even if it's just first name and last name, just so you can follow along when you're creating your letter. So I'm going to move this into our folder so we have that there. I'm going to get that in there. And one more thing. Okay, so now I have all my stuff in here. So I've created my form. Okay, so no data has been collected yet. I just have my form. Now I am ready to, if we go back to our steps, now I am ready to create the form letter. And it says with tags. So what a tag is basically matching up where it is getting the data from in your Google Sheet. So for example, when I was looking at my form, I had first name and last name. So these would be my tags, first name colon, last name colon. This would also be a tag. I know it's very long and it's just easier to copy and paste. Okay. So now what I want to do is create my form letter. And I'll show you examples of slides later on, but right now we're going to look at the letter. So inside your folder, and again, I would suggest putting all of this in the same folder so you know where everything is. I'm going to create a new document in here, and I already have it created. And then we're going to start typing. Okay, so you can type whatever you want. You can have images, you can format. So whatever you need to include in here, you can do that. I added this tag that says today. It does have to be in all capital letters in order for it to work. But when I'm talking about a tag, that means you're going to have these alligator brackets at the beginning and the end. So double alligator brackets at the beginning, double alligator brackets at the end. And then you can see within here, I have the different tags, or those are my column headings. Now, we want to look closely because look, I have first name, I have last name. Okay. I didn't copy and paste, I typed those in. I forgot the colon. So I always suggest just copying, coming back to my letter, oops, wrong letter, and then pasting it within those alligator brackets. Just so you know that you are collecting the exact information. Okay, and I'm going to do that again for my last name. So I'm going to copy this, Control C if you don't know the shortcut, and then I'm going to come back here and I'm going to do a Control V to paste, making sure that I still have that that colon in there so it reads it properly. And I just have some stuff, you know, you indicated that you would be interested in volunteering for, and then I put the the form question, or which will be our spreadsheet heading. Would you be able to volunteer for any of the following holiday parties? And I put it inside of those alligator brackets. The best way to contact you is via, and here's my contact information. Okay. So again, if you are following along and you just created a quick form with first name, last name, you can at least do that, you know, dear first name, last name. Put your punctuation at the end just like you would. You can format. So if I wanted this to be a different size, I can format this as needed. So as long as you're formatting the entire tag, it doesn't matter. You can make it a different color, you can underline it, whatever you need to do. Then once your form letter is set, now you are ready to start with AutoCrat. Okay. So again, AutoCrat is not in a Google form. AutoCrat is in Google Sheets. Okay. So if I am collecting my data from a Google form and my responses are coming in after open house or parent teacher conferences, I'm starting to collect data. I want to view this in my Google Sheets. Okay. If this is your first time through a Google form, I believe it says create a sheet, and then it's going to create the document with all the collected data. So I'm going to click on this and you'll see it's going to open my Google Sheet for me. And then here is my information that I've collected from my parents. This is where we are going to begin AutoCrat. So AutoCrat is within the extension menu. So if I click on extensions, it is an add-on. If you do not have AutoCrat, the first time through, you are going to say get add-ons. So once I click on get add-ons, it is typically one of the first few. And we're thinking, give it a sec, there. So it usually is one of your first few. So then, and of course today it is not. So you can just type in AutoCrat and it will populate and then you're going to install it. Okay, you can see mine says it's already installed. If you already have it, maybe you already created it or you tried it one time, but you don't remember. Under your extensions, you might see it listed as AutoCrat. Okay, so I'll give you a second for you guys to make sure you have that because you want to follow through the steps. Even if you don't have a lot of information, you can still follow through the steps through AutoCrat. There are 9 steps to AutoCrat. So we already did some steps outside of AutoCrat. And again, these are very important. Creating your folder, creating your form if needed, and then creating your form letter. So those 3 are very important to have done prior to starting AutoCrat. Now that you have AutoCrat installed, so I'm going to come to AutoCrat. Before I launch this, okay, before I start, there's this help button right here. So that tiny URL that I put into the chat, if I click on help, that is going to take me to the AutoCrat help screen. I'm going to say learn more. That's going to open up the AutoCrat website. Okay. And all the way down at the bottom, you can look through the steps, but the user guide is right here. And that is that shortened URL that I gave you. It will take you directly here. A lot of useful information in here. They have animated GIFs to kind of show you all the steps that we're going to be going through. Okay. And you can see here, they're doing a student progress report, pulling grades from a spreadsheet. We're just using a letter. There are all kinds of different examples, ways that you can use this. So I'm going to go back to my sheet. Now this time I'm going to go through and I'm going to launch. So when I launch, it is going to show you any jobs that you already have created. If you don't have any created, it's going to ask you to create a new job. So you can see here, I have one that says new job. So I'm going to click on that. That is going to start taking me through the 9 steps of AutoCrat. Okay. So the very first thing that you want to do is name your job. So I am going to put this as, parent volunteers. I'm not going to save yet because I want to go through all the steps. So I'm going to go to next. This is why I suggest doing those first 3 steps, the folder, the form to collect your data, and then your letter. because step number 2 of AutoCrat is to select your template, or your form letter. So you can see here I've used some of these before, but I want to find the one that I've already created from Drive. So I said to organize it within that folder so you know where it's at. So I'm going to create or from Drive. And then since I just created it recently, it's going to populate right at the top. Okay. If you didn't create it recently, if you created it a while ago, you can search list view, you can type it in, but you can find it. So I'm going to click on my volunteer letter. Okay. So it populated. Now I'm ready to go to step number 3. So I'm going to go to next. So most of this will fill in. Okay, so this is where you are mapping where it's collecting the data from. And you can see here, map the source data to the template. So the template is that form letter. It's telling me that I have one that has been unmapped. So it's not matching. So the data won't come in. Where is it pulling from? It's pulling from my form responses. So my sheet tab right here. So if you are working with multiple sheets at the bottom, so maybe you have, ninth grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade, and you're only doing this letter for ninth grade, you would be able to click and pick the different tabs. Okay. My heading row is in row 1, which it is. Okay. And then my first row of data starts in row number 2, which it does. Now it's saying, hey, first name, colon, is mapped to first name, which is right here. So perfect. Last name is mapped to last name. Would you be able to volunteer for any of these parties? Which is right here. Okay, so perfect. Those are mapped. My contact information, I have in my form letter that it says contact. Well, I called it primary contact information. So it's showing me this little tag here showing me that it's not mapped. So the tag doesn't match. So I want to come here and say, hey, let's find that column heading, which would be my primary contact. And now it's mapped. You can see that little tag disappeared in both places. So now that everything is set in step number 3, I'm ready to move on to step number 4. This is the file name. What do you want this to be saved at in your Google Drive? Okay, so it's going to populate a document for every response, and then you want it to populate somehow so you know what it means. So I am going to use a tag. And again, you can copy and paste. I just know what it is. So I'm gonna put last name. So I have my alligator brackets, last name colon, alligator brackets. So I'm making sure it matches this. Then I'm gonna hit space and put volunteer. So here is the next step, and this is a newer feature. And talking with some of the building secretaries, I didn't realize that this would be important. But then I'm like, when they explained it to me, I'm like, oh, that makes complete sense. So by default, the output is it's going to create a Google Doc for each row. So if I wanted to print these, I would have to go into each document and print them separately. Single output mode means that it is going to create one file with all of the different letters so I can print them all together. And then do you want to add a page break between the rows? Yes. So it's going to make a separate letter, but there's only going to be one file for me to open. Instead of opening up Jane's and then opening up Susie's, I can just open up the one file and print all together. And it'll still print them one per page, but it's going to be one file to open. My other option, instead of making it a Google Doc, I can make it a PDF. So a lot of office personnel like the PDF form because a lot of Dazzle reports and things like that are PDFs, so they're used to working with those PDFs. So we're actually going to switch that to PDF. I'm going to put this as multiple output mode so you can see how it creates a separate document for each person. Then if we have time, we can go through it again and try it as a single output. So now I'm going to go to next, step number 5. This is the important thing. Okay, so remember step 1, I said create that folder. If you do not put this in a folder, it is going to blow up your Google Drive and it just puts them all in your drive, all listed there. So that is why it is so important to create that folder so you can have them all organized. So think about it. If you're in a classroom setting and you have 30 parents coming in, you don't want to go through your drive and find 30 different documents. They are all going to be listed in that one folder that you created. If you're working in the office and you're trying to print out something for, say, the 5th grade parents, you might have 100, you might have 150, up to 300 parents that you're going to be sending these letters to. You don't want them all in your drive. You want to make sure they're in that folder that you created. And since I created that document within the folder, it tries to populate and say, hey, that document was in this folder. Why don't we put our destination folder the same? But if it does not auto-populate, you would just click here to choose a folder, and then you would be able to click and pick whichever folder you needed. So I'm going to leave mine automatic with AutoCrat because that was the new one that I created. And I'm ready to move on to step number 6. Sorry, step 6. Step number 6, we're not doing anything with. It is an optional step. So we're going to move on to step number 7. Step number 7, we are going to also skip. Once you get good with AutoCrat, some people do use step number 7. It is an option, but it allows you to add some conditional uh, filtering if needed. But again, right now we're not going to go through that. That's once you get comfortable using AutoCrat. Step number 8, how do you want these documents sent? Okay, so if you want to share the document, okay, so if you share it, it'll allow you to email it. So if you're collecting email addresses, you can put the email address right here using the tag and whatever. So if you're collecting a Google form and you're collecting email addresses, you can put that right in there. If you are not going to email this out, you can say share document, no, and it's just going to put it in your Google Drive. So it's a little tricky because we talk so much about sharing with Google products. When we think about sharing, you're thinking about sharing that individual document. Well, in this case, sharing it out means to be able to send that email. Okay, so do you want to send that email with the document, or are you just going to keep that document in your folder? Okay, so that's the step. I'm going to leave this as no, and it's just going to populate my PDFs in my folder, and I'm going to click on next, which is our final step. So our final step is when should it run the job? So we're creating this job called parent volunteers. So it's right there. If you are using a form, you would want it on every form response. Okay, so let me do that again. So run on form trigger. That means if somebody submits a form, yes, run AutoCrat and create the letter. If you're not using a form, you do not need to create that. I'll give it a second. It's thinking. Um, Run on time trigger would be say, hey, okay, I want to run this every hour. So, as parents are coming into parent conferences, maybe it's a 3-hour stretch. You want to run this every hour so the forms are creating or the letters are creating as the night goes on. You have several different options. You can just run this daily, morning and night, whatever. I'm going to leave this on no, but I want my form trigger on yes. Okay. So that is our last step of AutoCrat. So once I have my AutoCrat done, now I want to save. So it's setting it up. Okay. Now the first time, since now that it's set up, I want to make sure that I run through it. Okay. So I have run. So that's going to run my job. If I made a mistake, I can edit. If I want to see an overview of everything that I just set up, I can click on that and it's going to show me everything that's going to happen. And you can see it's now starting to run. Okay. So once I hit run, it's going to say, okay, let's look. And it's going to populate from the old forms that have been created. So it's starting. It takes a few minutes. The more rows you have, the longer it takes, but it will populate them. Okay. So here's what it did. So it created the document ID, which you don't really need to know. That's in the URL. It creates an actual URL. So if you want to send the URL to somebody, you could. It creates a link to the document. So if I want to see the document, I can just click on it and it populates the document on my screen so I can see it. Okay. And then you can see here it put in the first name, last name. It says you indicated that you'd be interested in volunteering for Halloween. And then the best way to contact you is via, and then the phone number populated. Okay, so now if we go back and we look at this one, it's going to look a little different because now it's going to have Susie's information. Okay, and then they're interested in volunteering for two things because they checked both Christmas and end of the year. And then again, the phone number. Okay, so again, if I want to go and find these documents, I can always come back to the spreadsheet because these are not going to disappear. When I go back into my folder, let me do a quick refresh. Now you can see how it populated those documents. And the more and more files you get, they're still going to keep populating in this. So for example, another parent comes in, or maybe you put this in a newsletter, for those of you that haven't responded. So I'm going to fill this out. We're going to see how quickly this works. Oh, I can't spell. Okay. And best way to contact me, I'm going to say cell phone, put in the number. And then I want to volunteer for Valentine's Day. I'm going to hit submit. And we're going to go quickly to our form, which it's right here, or I'm sorry, our spreadsheet. So the new information is here. It just started the job and it's going to run on itself because I created that form trigger to say, hey, anytime a form is submitted, run it. So now here is my new letter. So within seconds, we now have this letter ready to print. Okay. So populating the correct information. Okay, so again, that's collecting from a form. Okay, now maybe a parent sends in a note, and I'm going to close this for a minute. So maybe a parent sends in a note and says, I can volunteer, for Christmas. Okay, so student's name is And then I'll put their cell phone number, and you notice I'm doing everything manually. Okay, and they're going to volunteer for Christmas. Okay. So I have this information in there. So we're watching it, and notice nothing has started. Okay, because remember, when I created my AutoCrat, I said when a form is submitted, well, I manually typed this in. So in order for it to run now, I have to force it. So I'm going to go back to my AutoCrat. I'm going to launch it. You will see my job will populate. And now I just have to manually run it. So I'm going to say run. Looks like the little play button. It'll go through, and now it's started, and it's going to populate my document based on what I typed in. So again, you don't have to use a form. You can manually, have stuff, or like I said, if you have something from an Excel spreadsheet and you brought into Google Sheets, you can easily add AutoCrat to that and create your form letter and get things sent out. Okay, so, whatever you have, but it has to be in a Google Sheet in order for AutoCrat to work. Now, as we're going through this, let's look back at our folder. So our documents are being created, they're in our folder. So if I wanted to print these out, I have to go into each one individually to print. Okay. And sometimes this is good. Sometimes you want it that way because you want to check things over, whatever it might be. Maybe you are emailing it to each of the parents. That's fine. You're going to have it created separately. But there are times where you want to create it so it creates one document. So I'm going to come back here and I'm going to show you a little cheat. Okay. So maybe you decided, I'm going to close this. You're like, oh, you know what? I want to email these out to parents, but I never added a column for email. I need to do that. So I'm going to come back to my form and I'm going to add, let's go here. I'm going to add a new column called email address. Okay. And that's it. I'll put the little colon there so it matches. So now it created in my sheet. Right here's my new column for my email addresses. So if, I want to fill those in manually or if I had them. Now, it does not automatically add this to the form letter. Okay, but I want to email these form letters out to the parents, so I need these email addresses in here. And I'm just going to put in, I'll just put in my real one so I can actually get it. Okay, so far nothing is set. So we're going to go back in and we're going to modify our AutoCrat. Thinking. We're going to click on the little pencil so we can edit. So we're going to edit. And then we're just going to skip through some of our steps. Except now, so our letter's there. I'm not going to add the email address to our letter. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to make sure. Why did it not populate? That it is. It should have populated my tag. Why didn't it? Oh, because I don't have it in my form letter. Silly me. That's why, because I'm putting it in the email. So my fault. So let me go through. Next. Okay. So now, well, we'll still leave it as single output. I'm going to go to next. I'm going to leave it in there. Next. This time I'm going to say share document, but right here is where I want to put this tag. So I'm going to put the tag. And then I can put, my subject area. And you can actually put tags in here. You don't have to have a document. So right now I'm sharing this document with it, but I can actually just type out and put information in here. Like, I can put, the tag for would you be able to volunteer? But this is going to email it out and then I would save it. And so it's now going to go to this email address and actually get emailed to me. So that's another option, is to collect that email address to be able to email it. Okay. We're going to go back and we're going to go here. Okay. So we're going to do a single output this time. Okay. So I'm going to actually cancel this, close this. I'm going to cheat the system a little bit. I'm going to erase all these things that you see here. So this makes it look like that it has not been run. Okay, so I've had to do this before. Many times our certificates come through AutoCrat. So when you finish the class today, I'm going to give you the link so you can click and you'll get a certificate. Sometimes when people are typing in their email address, they've typed it in incorrectly and they're like, I have not received a document yet. So then what I do is just erase it and then I rerun it after I have corrected the email address. So it'll go through that process again. So we're going to go through this again. I'm going to go back into my AutoCrat, and the only thing this time what I'm going to do now is change that step so it is a single output mode. So I'm going to go to edit. I'm going to skip through the first couple, and I'm going to say single output. And yes, I want page breaks in between the data rows. That means they'll each be on a separate page. So now I'm going to hit save. And I'm going to force the run. So I'm going to click on the play. It's thinking. You can see it's creating those. Now when I come back through here, it created one document, okay, but it has 4 pages. So if I scroll through here, and again, I left the file name the same with the last name and volunteer. If I was going to do it, I would just call it like parent volunteer letters or, first grade parent volunteers, something instead of having that personalized name in there. But you can see as I scroll through here, each of them has been populated within this document. Now, if I want to print it, I click print once and all of them print at the same time. So you can see how sometimes it is better to have them separate and sometimes it's better to have them all together. So it's all depending on what you're populating, how many you're populating, and what the purpose of them are. Okay. I am going to stop there, and there hasn't been any questions in the chat, but I just want to see if anybody has any questions running through the steps of AutoCrat before I show some more examples. Okay, I'm going to take that as a no, or if you are still typing, I will see it pop up in the chat. But I do want to show you guys some examples. So again, we just used a letter as our example. Okay. There are different things you can do, different activities. So, for example, we just finished the end of the school year. Um, after, at the end of the school year, we're always giving awards, especially to our younger kids and so forth. But when, we wanna print awards, we don't necessarily wanna print everybody's name on those. So if we have a class list, we can use our tags just like we did for, the form letter, but now when we are picking instead of picking a document, we pick a Google slide, and that will populate each of the awards. So then when we have an award printed, it is going to look like this. So again, you can have them go individually. You can have them, as one file if you have multiple and you just want to print them all out at once. So again, using a Google slide is the same as using a doc as long as you have those tags. So making sure that the tags match what is either in the column heading of your spreadsheet or the questions in your Google form. Okay. So again, that is one example. Another example is doing some type of Mad Lib. So this is a great quick activity that the students can do. Maybe you have a couple Chromebooks in the back of the classroom. The kids can go through there and it populates based on a form. So the students would come in and they would fill in the person, place, thing, nouns, and so forth. And then it's going to take this information from the Google form and it will populate it in a form letter. Well, this being a form letter is now a story. So the students just created a Mad Lib because they didn't see the story ahead of time. But when it prints the story, it's going to have what they had for their person, place, thing, noun, whatever it might be. So you can see how each of these is the tags that match up with that Google form that the students would fill out. Okay. And then it would populate each of these individually for the students to be able to see. Okay. So again, different activities, different things that you can do, whether it's for the classroom, whether it is for registration, whether it's for letters to get home, whatever it might be. For example, I took attendance today. So my attendance, I can easily create an AutoCrat from this and populate certificates of participation. So if I wanted to do it automatically, I can start my AutoCrat right from here. I can launch it and I can start filling those in and have it populate from the information that was collected from attendance. So again, any type of Google Sheet that you have, as long as the data is on separate lines, you can use AutoCrat to merge it into either Google Slide or a Google document and or an email. Doesn't always necessarily have to go to one of those. You can email this information out. Okay. Any last minute questions? I am going to put in the chat. And some of you have already taken classes from us in the past. Um, this is while we're in the AutoCrat class, if you click on that, it is a Google form that you would fill out, and you will see that once you complete that Google form, you are going to receive an email that has your certificate of participation for this class. So the tiny